and welcome to our Gold participants from around the world. I'm Fiona Lang Sharp, IBCLC Public Relations Manager and MC for Gold Learning. Well, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Michels today, and she's going to be speaking at our upcoming Gold Lactation Conference, and her presentation is titled "A Thousand Days in Gap City, Exploring the Relationship Between the Breastfeeding Gap and the Word Gap." Welcome, Dia. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, we're truly excited to have this topic. This relates to everything we do. You know, it's very relational, and we've enjoyed having some time with you off air today, just going through this presentation and of course learning even some more things and talking about it. So it's I know that our audience is just going to love it. But first of all, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience and tell them how you became interested in this topic.
I'd love to. I live in Washington, D.C. I grew up in California and came here right after college, so I've been here my entire adult life. And I've spent my time here primarily publishing books. My first book was called, it's a very exciting title. It's called A Woman's Guide to Yeast Infections.
Oh,
And that came out a little over 30 years ago now.
wow.
And then my second book, both of them were written with Dr. Naomi Baumschlag. My second book was Milk, Money, and Madness, The Culture and Politics of Breastfeeding. And that was a manuscript that Naomi had started but needed help finishing. And as you could imagine, when you work full time on a breastfeeding book, you can become pretty passionate about the topic. Breastfeeding has been a part of my life for my oldest one is 27 now, so for 27 years, and writing has been a big part of my life. And so my two passions are really about the attachment parenting and how you nurture another human being to a position where they can be a thriving, independent adult who then can go on to nourish other people, and how to communicate and how to use words specifically in communication. Because by writing and speaking, it's how we connect with each other. And so I've been working on breastfeeding and I've been writing books, and I started learning about the word gap. And it just struck me that the word gap seemed very parallel in its construction to the breastfeeding gap, except that nobody was talking about the relationship between the two. The lactation consultants and the WIC staffs were talking about the breastfeeding gap, and
Right.
the early childhood experts and the educators were talking about the word gap. And it seemed
Ah.
to me that there was an awful lot that was missing in those two conversations that all had to do with the connection between the two. And so I put this talk together um, year and a half ago and
Oh,
delivered it for the
wonderful.
first time at the California Breastfeeding Summit, and have delivered it a number of times since then. And each time I do it, I learn more. And I'm hoping that by getting this topic out there and sharing what I understand to be the connections, we can have some real dialogue about how the two are connected and how we can achieve all of our goals if we work together.
Well, it's great to hear how this came about and some of why. And now I understand more a little bit more about you. I'm just loving hearing all of those things, Dia. So tell me, when you were doing more of this research, and I can tell this is something that you've loved for a long time, but when you were sort of doing it for this presentation, did you discover even more that was inspiring to you, or was there changes that we've discovered over the years? Like, what is it that really struck you as being important?
There's several things. The first is that all of the research that backs up the conclusions for the word gap, the research that shows the number of words different moms speak and the impact that has on the child and the importance of that in neurological development, all of that research is from the 1960s.
Oh, right.
Literally the 1960s. This is not based, the word gap is big now. It's really big, and topic is getting all sorts of funding and all sorts of attention, and states are rolling out campaigns to reduce the word gap, and early childhood groups are focusing on the word gap. But I'm horrified and disgusted that this has just been discovered when we've known all of this since the 1960s.
Right.
It really speaks to how things become topical and then they're never in the headlines again. And so I think one of the things that's important to me about this topic is how we chose as a culture to ignore it for 60 years. And now all of a sudden it's the most important thing in the world. So that's one thing that's important to me is if we really care about early childhood and if we really care about children and families, we should be paying attention to the research when it's current and not 60 years later. But that said, I'm delighted that it's getting attention now. The other thing about it that really strikes me is in the word gap world, the official phrase is every time a word is spoken, a neuron fires in a baby's brain. So the more you speak, the more neurons fire. And that's well and good. And I'm not refuting that in any way. But I am a little concerned that it's not that simple because the reality is we have five senses. And anytime any of those five senses are stimulated, a neuron fires. And so to focus exclusively on words really dismisses the importance, for instance, of touch and the importance of smell and the importance of taste and the importance of all those senses firing. And when you look at what a breastfeeding mother is doing, she is stimulating all five senses.
Right.
And so I think that allowing the conversation to be focused on words is a very subtle way of dismissing the importance of breastfeeding. And that's
Uh,
one of the reasons I want to get this talk out there because, yes, when you say a word, a neuron fires, but
right.
that's not the only way to get a neuron to fire.
Right. I just love I just love that. I really do. You had so many great points there and I can't even go back and point them all, but yeah, just making sure that we're paying attention, that the research has been around for a long time and not to just zero in on just one element. Just great to hear that. I'm excited. This is something that I started researching when I was a young mom. I was very fortunate to be in that environment with peers, and so this has always been extremely important to me, and I know that we can always do better. So it's great. I'm glad that you're still pursuing this and still seeing it as being valuable. I know that our listening audience will see that way too. So, Dia, lastly, before we let you go, perhaps you could just touch on just one or two key points that you would like to see our delegates, take away from here, or you're excited about sharing. What would be those points?
The the most important thing for me is what do we need to know in order to help a family thrive? And it's not what are the most important things we know to help a baby thrive because the baby doesn't exist by itself. The baby
Right.
exists within the family. And so the most important thing, obviously, is for that child to be safe. And then we work up from there, right, when we're talking about basic
Yeah.
needs. But I think it's very important to understand that the easiest and most effective way to maximize everything in a child's life is to have that baby at the breast. And we can't have that baby at the breast if moms don't understand just how important it is and if moms don't have the support and the opportunities to be available to the baby. And
Yeah.
so if we want to solve the word gap, if we want to talk about food security, if we want to look at the achievement gap, if we want to look at lowering healthcare expenses, pick any issue, right? If we want to look
Right,
at
right,
that,
right.
we have to support breastfeeding. And we
Totally.
can't support breastfeeding unless every single mom has the option to breastfeed. And that means, as you know, support from her employer, support from her family, support from her community, and information. And so it's a pretty big picture, but it's just really not as complicated as we'd like to feel it is.
Wow, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I'm just so absorbed in your words already. I can't actually wait to hear more. It's going to be it's already been a pleasure working with you to this point, and I'm really looking forward to what comes out of this. I'm particularly, interested to see how people relate to this internationally around the world, Dia. It'll be really great to have that international audience engaging and talking about this. And it will be, be great to hear what people do in order to facilitate some of these things too. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure being here.
And thank you to our listening audience for joining us. And Dia Michels will be at our Gold Lactation online conference for 2017. You can join us at www.goldlactation.com. There you will find conference registration and also up-to-date schedules on when all of our speakers are speaking. I see that we have you scheduled for Monday, the 10th of April, but make sure you go to the website, check the local time for yourself, and join us for this fantastic presentation live with Dia. So thank you again for joining us today, Dia Michels, and thank you again to our listening audience. Bye bye for now, everyone.